In terms of what we want to focus on today, so last week was a good step in the right direction. It wasn't the long-term solution, it wasn't a long-term balanced budget with reforms, that's what we got to get. But it was a step to doing that. So last week we did three things. First, we prevented Speaker Madigan's majority from passing a wildly out of balance budget that would have had $7 billion more in spending than we had in revenue. It would have forced a big tax hike with no reform. So stopping that was a good step. And we're now spending at a materially lower level than what they were trying to push. So that's one. Two, we got schools open on time with some more money, an affordable amount more money. That's great for teachers, students, and taxpayers. And we were able to do that without having to bail out Chicago public schools. They've been mismanaged for decades. They have huge deficits and debt. And Speaker Madigan's majority was demanding that the state send $500 million more to CPS to bail them out. We said no, not fair to Illinois taxpayers. We stood against that and we were victorious. That bailout got stopped. Chicago is going to get a little bit more money under this plan, but all school districts are going to get more around the state on a proportionate basis, so that's good. Mm-hmm. I demanded full foundation level funding, plus some more for low-income communities. We got that done. Your readers may not know this, but Speaker Madigan's majority has cut school funding 4 times in the last 10 years. We've been playing political football with our school system, and we're the worst state in America now for funding schools. We're dead last, 50 out of 50. I ran for governor to change that. We should put much more money in our schools. I demanded it last year, demanded it this year. We're going to push it again next year. And then the third big thing we got done is put pension reform front and center on the table. We haven't passed the full pension reform bill yet, but we passed a pension parity bill for teachers' pensions, and that will only become law if all pensions are reformed. So that we protect existing benefits, but for future work we have other options that are more affordable, and we get compensation structures so that employees can choose among different plans and get some more affordable, fair pension plans that can save taxpayers billions. So that's a great step in the right direction too.
Sure. And you know, you kind of, and that's all the things that's happened, and that's great. I'm glad the state got at least moving toward the right direction.
Yeah.
Looking to the future though, especially here in Southern Illinois.
Yep.
The life of SIU.
Yeah.
At other community colleges, Johnny Logan, Ren Lake, all of
Yeah.
those, you know, they're
Yeah.
vital for students' futures,
Yeah.
employment of the region.
Yep.
Legislature has shown a desire to fund K-12.
Yep.
What's the future for higher education after December?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I am very focused on making sure we get higher education properly supported. You know, again, higher education in Illinois has been reducing state support for decades. This is not a recent problem. This has been going on for a long time. We've got to change our funding for education and treat our students and our teachers as the top priority. SIU is one of the greatest universities in the country. They deserve support. They drive great research. They create jobs. We've got to support them. And their support has been being reduced over time for a long time. This is not a one-year problem. So what we need to do is get balanced budgets so we have the resources to put more money in our education. Schools should come first. Here's the key that your readers ought to know. To have balanced budgets, to have the resources we need to fund education, we need more economic growth. We have not been growing our economy in Illinois. We've been one of the bottom 5 states for decades and decades. And here's a simple fact. If we just grow at the nation's average, just average, and we should be at one of the top 10 states, not just average, but if we just grow at the nation's average the last 15 years, we wouldn't have any deficit today. We wouldn't have any unpaid bills today. We would not have needed any income tax hikes at all. And we'd have $13 billion more in the state treasury to fund SIU
Sure.
And other services. Economic growth is the key, more jobs is the key, and to do that, we need to do several things. Workers' comp reform. Workers' comp is pushing our employers out, especially our manufacturing and transportation firms. Workers' comp is way too high in Illinois. Caterpillar told us that workers' comp costs CAT 5 times as much here as there are other states. They've been growing their jobs out of Illinois for decades. We need workers' comp reform.
Yeah.
We also need property tax relief. We have the highest property taxes in America. It's pushing a lot of our employers out. We need more local control, get rid of the unfunded mandates coming out of Springfield.
Sure, and I have a question about some of your must-haves on reform here in a second.
Okay.
I believe I heard you say last week that there's a good chance that there won't be a vote on any kind of full budget until after a general election.
That's what the speaker and the president both said.
You're right, okay. And so the state stopgap budget, which funds, most services throughout December. What are the actual expectations for the state, more specifically Southern Illinoisans, after the stopgap's over, and
Yeah.
we're looking at January.
Yeah, so if you look back at the history in the Illinois General Assembly, the big votes, the tough votes are taken in lame duck sessions after general elections. That's just how they do. It's not the way I prefer to do it. I think we should be voting now. And I asked for votes now, but the Speaker and President Cullerton, they have the supermajority. They control the terms in the legislature. They said no votes on these things until after the election. I think they're hoping that they can pick up seats, consolidate even more power than they've already got a supermajority. But more power, they can control things, and they won't have to do any reforms. I think that's what they're hoping. This November is a chance. We'll see if the people of Illinois are going to support the status quo and the Speaker's power in the Chicago machine, which has been dictating terms in our state for 35 years, or are people going to support reformers and change. This is going to be an important November decision. That said, somewhere between November 8th and mid-January, when the new legislature is seated, there are going to be big votes on balancing budget and on reforms, workers' comp, pension reform, local control. I'm going to try to get a vote on term limits. We need political reform. You know, our political system doesn't work for people. We have a one-party system. The Speaker Madigan's majority has controlled the legislature for 35 years, created deficits and fewer jobs. And for 12 years prior to my becoming governor, we had two governors in the same party as the Speaker competing with each other to see who could spend more and create more deficits. We need a two-party system. Term limits and fair maps can help get that done.
Well, speaking of, hoping we get a budget in January or so, the state seems to be operating 6 months at a time right now.
Well, yeah.
Give or take. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
illusion that the everyday citizen is seeing.
Uh-huh.
So what does that have to, I mean, how do we know that this isn't going to continue to happen?
Oh, because we can't stay on the existing track, and it's really going to be up to the people, letting the legislators know, stop having unbalanced budgets, and let's get reforms to grow the economy. People in Illinois know we need more jobs, we need more economic growth, and we need the people to let the legislature know. The good news is some members of Speaker Madigan's caucus in the supermajority have finally stood up to him and said no to the unbalanced budget. That was a great step. Mm-hmm. And here's the reason I'm optimistic. Over the past year, we put in place working groups, Democrats and Republicans working in the General Assembly to come up with reforms. They were working separate from the Speaker, separate from me, and they were in early May, they were about to announce some great progress on reforms, workers' comp reform, pension reform, local control. Speaker Madigan got wind that they were going to make an announcement, stopped it, and that's when he said no votes until after November. So I believe the rank and file members, some of them, not all of them, but some of them are ready to stand up, not go with the Chicago machine, but go with reforms to grow the economy, and I believe they're going to take those votes after the election.
And you spoke a lot about reform, and this is the point where I wanted to get to. What are your must-haves, when it comes to reform, and what do you see being the toughest to get, to actually make happen?
Yeah.
And what are you willing to let go?
Yeah, no, so that's fair. So I've done a lot of turnarounds in my life, grown a lot of successful organizations, businesses, and other things. And it's clear to me what should happen. We laid out a 44-point plan to get Illinois strong, protect taxpayers, create jobs. But I've said we're not going to get that all done the first year or the second year. Let's winnow it down to a few things. So I've taken a lot of things off the table. But it's boiled down to a handful of things that are really critical to have. We need workers' comp reform. It's the #1 regulation that's pushing manufacturing jobs out of the state. And it's also costing taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars because workers' comp costs inside government is also very expensive. Workers' comp reform. Secondly, we need pension reform. And both parties agree we need pension reform, and we've come up with a constitutional way to do it. We need to protect existing pensions benefits that have been accrued so far, but choices for the future that are more affordable. Third, we need local control of government costs. Right now, there are unfunded mandates coming from Springfield dictating terms for in Williamson County or here in Southern Illinois. Local residents don't get to control how the contracting is done, the bidding is done, the bargaining is done. It's all dictated by Springfield, and that drives up the cost. Each community should control their own community, their own schools as they see fit. That can bring down the cost of government and bring down property taxes and bring more jobs here. And then finally, we need political reform. Our democracy doesn't work on a one-party basis. Democracy doesn't work when power is concentrated in just a few incumbents. Term limits and fair maps, redistricting reform can get that done. Now, Speaker Madigan is in court with his lawyer right now trying to block the fair map amendment to deny voters the ability to vote for whether fair maps or redistricting reform will happen. I hope they get defeated in court, we'll see. But what we need is for term limits to get voted on in the General Assembly. I'm going to term limit myself at 8 years at the absolute most. I don't believe anybody should stay in one office longer than 8 years. And I'm a volunteer, I'm not taking any compensation. I believe people should get some amount of pay. We can debate whether they're getting paid too much for a part-time job. And I applaud Comptroller Munger for making sure that pay for legislators gets put in with the unpaid bills, doesn't just go to the top and get paid off the top like Speaker Madigan had set it up to do. So we're making changes in the system, but term limits and fair maps can make a huge difference.
And one last question here is, I was being told, the past 18 months has been tough on everybody, you know, especially those in human services.
Sure, that's right.
Just education, everybody.
Yeah, recent years have been tough, yeah.
I'm sure you've had this question before. What do you think you could have done differently or could have done better? Looking back, you know.
Well, the simple fact is we need to change, and our General Assembly is controlled by a supermajority that doesn't want to change. They've controlled the system, Speaker Madigan and all the folks who are loyal to him and so that keep him in office, the legislators who do what he tells them to do. They're in the supermajority. They've never had to compromise. They've never had to negotiate. They've never had to change. But they've created a system that's broken. We're losing our jobs, our taxes are too high, our family incomes are lower, and we got cronyism and corruption. The system needs to change. The good news is, after hard work, it shows how broken the system is. We should have had this done in a couple months. This has taken us 18 months. Finally, members of the General Assembly are saying, we support reform, we'll get it done, and we'll vote on it after the November election. So it took too long, but we're getting there.
Like you specifically, the way you went about things, I mean, do you think you could have done anything different?
The one thing we should somehow figure out how to do is let the people of Illinois know what's really at stake and what's really going on. It's hard to, you know, your average person in Illinois doesn't really know what workers' comp is, but it's a big deal that we have to change. Your average person doesn't know how much unfunded mandates are coming out of Springfield dictating how much they have to spend on their property taxes. We've got to do a better job, and that's the reason I'm eager to meet with you and other leaders. Get the message out about really what's at stake here and what's got to change so we can make sure the people of Illinois get involved in the process. That'll bring about the change. Great.
Thanks a lot.
Sir. Thanks for your
Appreciate the
time.
time.